Hello and welcome to another edition of our Memory Lane podcast here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network. And really pleased today to be joined by a guy who has a great story in hockey and a huge part of the Pittsburgh Penguins history. Troy Loney, member of the first two Stanley Cup championship teams more than 30 years ago. Troy, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on.
I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to hearing your stories. 30 years later, Troy, how proud are you? How much does it come up being part of the first Penguins championship teams?
You know, I look back at it as the years before, right? So there aren't too many of us that were here with the Penguins the years before we won the Cup. So people, that haven't been around the Penguins that long maybe don't quite appreciate the challenges and the struggles that the Penguins had. Mm-hmm. Not only as an NHL team trying to prove their worth, but also as a sports team in Pittsburgh. So having gone through that and being part of the first part of that and seeing how the city and the NHL has embraced the Penguins as a hockey team was very, very glad to be part of that.
Oh, that's excellent. That's a good bit of what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about the Stanley Cup championship teams, of course, but the build-up to that, how you got there in the 80s during the lean times, and then with Mario Lemieux. We'll get to all that here in just a minute. I do like to start the podcast, Troy, give people an idea about what you're doing now. What are you up to these days?
Yeah, so I retired my body retired a year before the rest of me did, and in 95, and I did a little bit of TV and radio with the Penguins for a couple years, and then went full on into the business world. I right now I'm executive vice president of a software as a service company based out of Boston called RX Sense, and I run their sales and marketing team. So little bit different than what I was doing when I was playing, for sure.
Are you still recognized? People know the name. People like to talk to you about your hockey career.
Yeah, it's taken a little bit of older folks nowadays because, the next generation has kind of come through. But, yeah, people see us in the community here in Pittsburgh, me and my fellow alumni, and they're always very gracious and very respectful and have some really good conversations.
Well, one of the great things about your career is you were a homegrown talent, drafted by the Penguins, made your NHL debut with the Penguins, ended up winning the Penguins, helping win the Penguins' first two Stanley Cups in 91-92. So can you just walk us back to you're a young man. It's 1982. You're drafted by the Pittsburgh Penguins, the 52nd pick overall. What did you think about Pittsburgh and the Penguins and your potential hockey future at that stage of your life?
Well, I mean, number one, you're excited to get drafted. That's a big deal. And it's not like today's world. In those days, like if you were not going to be a first-round pick, you did not go to the draft. And I think if I remember right, the draft was in Montreal that year. And I had spent my junior career playing with Rich and Ron Sutter, the Sutter twins. Mm-hmm. I was left winger, the center and right wing, and Rich got drafted in the first round by the Penguins. And I think that was a big part of me coming to Pittsburgh because they probably had been watching Rich quite a bit and saw me there. And so I get drafted by the Penguins. Excited to be in the NHL. Not quite sure what Pittsburgh was. I had my hockey cards with Oris Kinderchuk and Ken Schinkel, and that was kind of my exposure to what I knew about the Pittsburgh Penguins in the National Hockey League, because I grew up in the Western Canada area, and you got Montreal Canadiens and Toronto Maple Leafs, and that was it. That's the only teams you got to watch. So that was my exposure to the Penguins, was through some hockey cards.
So you work your way through the minors. You debut with the Penguins during the 83-84 season. What did you eventually learn about the Pittsburgh Penguins? You said you didn't know a whole lot about them. Once you got to Pittsburgh and began your NHL career, what did you find out about the city of Pittsburgh and the Penguins franchise?
Well, I came in August or September, I guess it was right around Labor Day weekend, for my first training camp. I learned that it is incredibly hotter and way more humid than the prairies in Western Alberta. So my first training camp, and I think it happened to be the year that the cicadas were flying around. It was eye-opening, to say the least, for sure. And our camp was in in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and that rink we had fog in there all the time. And, I walk in and there's two of the three Hanson brothers / Carlson brothers from the Slapshot movie in that arena with the Penguins, in Johnstown. It was kind of surreal. So it was definitely eye-opening for sure. But I could tell that the team had been struggling for years, just couldn't really find an identity. And I wasn't sure kind of how that would work. And, my first NHL game that season, I think I, probably had more people in our arena in my junior hockey team than we did in Pittsburgh at the time. It was 3,000 people, 4,000 people. So that was a little bit of a surprise, but it was definitely something that the city you could just feel liked the idea of a hockey team and what it could do for the city and kind of the work ethic and all that kind of stuff. So it was interesting to be part of that early in my career.
All right, so as a huge sports movie buff, I'm going to backtrack just a bit to Slapshot and that era of hockey, 70s and 80s, and the Hanson brothers. People don't necessarily know a whole lot about what professional hockey might have been like in the 70s. Was Slapshot even remotely close, Troy? And a couple of those Hanson guys, they played professional hockey, and maybe all three of them did. So how good of hockey players were those guys?
Well, I played in the minors with Steve Carlson, so it really was two Carlsons and one Hanson.
Mm-hmm, you're right.
And the one of the Hansons still lives here in the Pittsburgh area and runs the Robert Morris Arena. So it was, Dave does. So it was, the hockey was closer than what people would think. My first training camp, they had rookie games, and you'd play rookie games against other NHL franchises' rookies. And, there was way more fighting in the first 5 minutes than there was goals in the whole game. So it was very similar to what people might see in the movie Slapshot.
Do you enjoy Slapshot all these years later, by the way?
You know what? It's good. It's good to see it. I get a chuckle out of the two guys that I know in the movie because one Steve Carlson's claim to fame was, he had one of the only speaking parts of the three of them, right? So,
yeah.
So, but it's fun to go back and watch.
Oh, that is fantastic. All right, so you get to Pittsburgh, and you can tell that the city is hungry for hockey, but there had not been a lot of success. There was financial turmoil, and then something happened. Some big hockey player, you got the first draft pick. His name was Mario Lemieux. You get him. How quickly did you see things maybe change in Pittsburgh once Lemieux came on board, once everybody could see what a talent he was, and the interest level and everything kind of building?
The Bartolo family owned us at the time. Denise DeBartolo was the owner, and her dad was obviously part of that equation. And you could see that getting a talent like that in Pittsburgh, regardless of who it is, outside of the football arena and a little bit in baseball, hadn't happened in hockey to the way hockey, the way the average fan would think about it. So it generated a tremendous amount of excitement. You could see that, obviously, for playing with him, you could see right away he was something special, something different. But it did take the team a while to kind of figure out the pieces around it. How would that work? Who should we get? What's the right mix? And at the time, we were probably, they went through some phases when I was here. We were a couple of young talents, and then many older players that had been around at different teams, and so that mix wasn't working very good. So it took the organization a while to figure out the mix on the ice.
And so how did they finally do that, Troy? What were the missing pieces and just how everything – and look, the Bulls didn't win championships with Michael Jordan until, deeper into his career. Is that a fair relative – I know completely different sport. Is that a relatively fair comparison?
Well, I think the franchise has to figure out how to make that work. Right?
Uh-huh.
So, and at the same time, there was salary disclosure going on. There was some stuff with the collective bargaining agreement, how players' contracts are working out. So it was this whole shift kind of change in the hockey world. But I would say, and a lot of people will call me crazy for saying this, but being part of this, obviously went through a bunch of different coaches changes, went through some different GM changes. I would say the one GM that started to have the team and the franchise think differently about the players and what we were was when Tony Esposito came here. We did the simple things like, the locker room we were in before, people would be amazed at kind of what it was. It was a cinder block room and just your average dining room chair that you'd find in any diner across the country with little garbages between. It really wasn't anything. There was nothing, didn't really feel like a home because the ceilings were 30 feet tall. We were sharing it with the Pittsburgh Spirit, the indoor soccer team. And when Tony Esposito came here, he said, listen, we're gonna treat you guys like you're a first-class NHL organization. We're going to change around the locker room. So those changes in attitude on how the organization looked at the players started to make the change. And then obviously Craig Patrick coming after that and putting the pieces together on the ice and Bob Johnson, then we're gone, right? Once Craig and Bob Johnson started to put all that stuff together.
So as the late 80s are playing out, you're seeing Mario develop into the superstar. The team is making whatever moves it's got to make. When did you kind of start to think, okay, maybe we'll have a shot at this at some point? Do you recall a time frame or a year, a period where that entered your mind?
I can't remember when it was when we made the playoffs. We hadn't made the playoffs in forever. We make the playoffs, play the Flyers in the first round, and that was the year actually Tony Esposito was here. So maybe 2 years prior, something like that, before we won the Stanley Cup. You could see the pieces starting to come together. So that piece, you could see that coming. Now, when Craig got here and started to really put a lot of the, outside of Mario, really, then we start to put the pieces together with Ron Francis, Ulf Samuelsson, we get Taglianetti, Barrasso comes into the mix. Kevin Stevens starts to come into the player he is. We get Larry Murphy. We surround it with Gord Roberts. Bob Erie and Phil Bork and myself saw this whole thing come through the organization. Giger shows up as a talent. Sean McEachran comes in. You start to think about the pieces and how quickly they came together. It became evident that we had something unique here. But until you win, right? Until you win in the playoffs, you think you can win. But once you start having success in the playoffs and everybody started to play the way that Craig Patrick and Bob Johnson had envisioned, that's when you knew, yeah, this is something special. And I didn't mention, think about the other guys. I didn't mention Brian Trottier, the leadership that he brought. Yuri Herdina, the things he could bring. Kevin Stevens, Mark Recchi. You go on and on. It was impressive.
Now, we hear all the time, Troy, hockey fans, the playoffs, hockey playoffs are the toughest playoffs, the biggest grind. From your personal experience as a guy who went through it, why is that? Why are the NHL playoffs the biggest and most difficult grind?
Well, the games are close together, number one. They started to come back close together again. We were playing every other day with travel, and it wasn't travel as in today's world travel. It was commercial travel, so you're up early and, getting on the first plane and getting in the city. And so really all you're doing during the playoffs is you eat, you play, and you sleep, and you eat, and you play, and you sleep. So it's a lot of games over a short period of time. And it just is physically demanding. It's the emotions are higher, the games are more important. Obviously, block shots start to become more important. Guys start to do things that they aren't necessarily in their, I would call, hockey nature. Whether it be the offensive guys coming back and blocking shots defensively, or maybe it's the defensive guys, chipping in a goal here and there. So that makes it all. A lot to do physically, and then the emotional. I always had this opinion: if you're going to win the Stanley Cup, you have to have an emotional high. Your team has got to tap into that emotion to win. If you don't, you're completely, you're 100% reliant then upon skill, and skill is great, but emotion and skill make you better.
All right, so you barely missed the playoffs by, I believe, a point in 89-90. So when you enter the 90-91 season, are people thinking Stanley Cup championship, Troy? Is that something that's even a realistic possibility in your minds?
No, you're thinking, hey, we made the playoffs. Let's get back to the playoffs. And during that season, if my memory serves me correct, we were not playing very well for the first half of the season when Bob Johnson was here. We were kind of up and down, and it was such a different dynamic in 90-91. Bob was such a positive coach. So, you're kind of used to the coaching in those days was, beat you, push you down, yell at you, and repeat, right? That was a little bit of that donkey theory, I guess they would call it. And so Bob comes in with this great positive attitude. I know we lost 7-1, but look at those 5 great things we did during the game. It's just a way different way of approaching things. So it took us a while to kind of buy into that. And then we, Craig made some really astute moves kind of, midway through that season that started to put a lot of different pieces. We started to win. But the unknowns were still there until you get into the playoffs.
Team finished 41-33-6. So a good season, not necessarily a great season, but as the season's winding down and you're heading into the playoffs, then was there a feeling, Troy? Do you recall any type of moment or any type of scenario within the guys on the team of, hey, maybe we could make a pretty deep run here?
Well, we had 2 guys. Again, I'm going by memory, but 2 guys that had won Stanley Cups on our roster. We had Brian Trottier and Coffey, and those 2 kept saying, "Hey guys, we got something pretty unique here." But the rest of us, we haven't gone through it.
Did you believe that? Did you believe them?
Well, Trottier's a pretty strong, willful guy. Coffey's very confident in the way he played and what he did. So, as a player, you want to believe because they're the guys that have been there and have been through it.
Mm-hmm.
But you still got to win that first series, right? That's the monkey off of all of our backs if we can win the first series.
All right, so you do. You keep on winning, and then kind of fast forward, you end up capturing the first Stanley Cup championship in Penguins history. What is your favorite memory of either the march all the way through, hoisting the cup? Do you have something that a memory, a detail that really sticks out to you all these years later?
The last we were. I can't remember the final score in the Minnesota game, but we were up 7-1 or 7-2 or whatever it was. The clock just couldn't go fast enough.
Right. Yep.
We were all like, no offsides, no icings. Let's just get this thing over with and let's celebrate. So the last minute or 2 on the bench was just amazing because it was going to happen. We knew it was going to happen, and just that countdown to the last few seconds, and then winning it and getting on the ice. I remember that vividly. And then, coming back to Pittsburgh on the plane was a great celebration, and then going into the airport and coming out of the gate when in those days everyone could get to anywhere in an airport and seeing the amount of people that were there. That was truly special because there were more people there probably at the gate than the first NHL game I played with. I played out here in Pittsburgh.
And so at this point, now we're talking the ultimate fruition for the hockey fans in Pittsburgh. And you talked about earlier that you knew that they were hungry. They wanted to enjoy good hockey. So now that you're on top of the world, what was it like being in the city at that point?
Oh, it was fantastic because now, we were, at the time I'd say we were sport number 3. We're starting to tap on sport number 2. The Pirates are pretty good at the time as well during those years with Bonilla and Bonds. But the city just glommed onto us. It was the fans all knew who you were. The excitement of winning a championship, because that's what Pittsburghers expect and should expect from their sporting franchises. It was so satisfying to be part of that 0 to top of the mountain experience during my career. So that was special. And just, we ran around the city with the cup and did some really cool stuff with it with fans. I took it out in those days. It didn't come with a handler or anything. And I took it out to show my neighbor across the street. I was living in the Mountain Lebanon area at the time. And, 2 hours later, I ended up back in my yard because people call people who saw people who came out of the yard, who came out of this yard, and all of a sudden there's like 500 people, standing in my front yard. It was really cool.
Well, I was actually the very next thing I was going to ask you is what you may have done personally with the Cup, but was it overwhelming that everybody wanted to see it?
Oh yeah, and think of this. So we win it the first year. You could ask for the Cup, right? So I asked for the Cup to take it back to my hometown, small town, 1,000 people, middle of Alberta. They ship it in a crate that came to the Calgary airport. I go to pick it up with my dad and my brothers, and we have it in the back of my dad's half ton, sharing it with my whole city or my whole town for a weekend as we did a golf tournament and raised some money for some really cool stuff and that. But it was just to see my old neighbor who lived and breathed hockey and had a son drafted by the Canadians around the Stanley Cup and having a chance to drink out of it. And then you come to Pittsburgh where people are really trying to understand what is this hockey, this Stanley Cup thing, and what do you mean you can have access to it? What do you mean it's kind of shared with everybody? It was fun.
Oh, that's spectacular. That's a spectacular story. So you come back the next year, you do the whole darn thing all over again. So I asked you going into the 90-91 season, did you feel like you were going to win the Stanley Cup? And you said no. But going into the 91-92 season, how strong of a feeling might there have been that you could repeat?
Very strong, right? Because you've done it. The cast of characters didn't change that much. Obviously, a few guys moved on. But the core of the belief is still there with the players, and then I'm sure you're going to walk me through this, but we didn't play very well. We were a little disjointed. I mean, it's a long season. Number one, you start in September. We ended whatever it was, second week of June. First year, you're back on the ice in September. So it's a very short time to kind of mentally and physically reset. We struggled a little bit during that season, and Craig, to his great wisdom as the GM, said, "Hey, we're going to shake this up a little bit." Made some deals that were definitely not easy deals to make, and it reinvigorated our team again. I can't remember when we got Tocchet and Shel Samuelson and Kenny Riggett, but somewhere mid to late in the season, I think.
So you're a homegrown Pittsburgh Penguin talent, drafted, come up through the organization. What does that part mean to you, Troy? The fact that you were there through all of that, the ups, the downs, missing the playoffs, being in a city where hockey wasn't necessarily the biggest thing in the world then, and so then you're able to enjoy all of that and get to the pinnacle.
Well, I mean, there's times, obviously, when you're going through that, especially as a young player. Like, I can't remember. I counted up one time, but I was up and down between the minors, which was in Baltimore, in the AHL, and Pittsburgh, something like 15 times in 4 years. Like, it was crazy. Right? I was just up and down and up and down and up and down. And there's times in there where you kind of go, gosh, I'd like to get somewhere with the organization a little more stable, right? But to have gone through all that, and the team have, obviously believed in something in me and wanted to keep me around. And then to see it go all the way to winning and being part of that with, a very select few guys. I mean, Phil, I think I can't remember Phil Bork if he was a draft or we got him as a free agent, maybe signing. Bob Erie was the other one. Bob was drafted the year after me. It's pretty special to have at least some of, Mario, obviously, the guys that were there kind of through the lean times and hadn't seen the success immediately. That was special.
Awesome. All right, so I want to talk about the end of your career as well, with all of those great memories with the Penguins. You were part of the very first Mighty Ducks of Anaheim team, 1993. You were taken in the expansion draft, I believe. What did you know about the Anaheim Mighty Ducks at that point, other than the movie? I mean, what was the feeling like going out and playing there for an NHL team owned by Disney?
Well, it was. I will say this just to wrap up my last year with the Penguins. The year that we won the President's Cup and lost in the second round of the Islanders, that was the best team I had ever played.
Mm-hmm.
We were by far the best team.
So was there disappointment there? I've heard these stories as well. How much of the disappointment factor was there?
Massive, because the expectation level was high. I truly believe we had a hard time because we won the President's Trophy. We won 17 games in a row. We tapped into our emotional reserves too much and probably played our stars too much during that period because you have to find the next gear in the playoffs, and we just couldn't seem to find the next gear in the playoffs. So extremely disappointing, and it was obvious to me, if we didn't win, even if we won, I was probably going to be left available in the expansion draft. And Florida Panthers there were two teams that year, Florida Panthers and Anaheim. So, either way, I was going somewhere sunny, which was nice to know. But I didn't know anything, obviously other than playing in LA, playing some games out there. Didn't know much about, the franchise, what it was going to be. Knew it was owned by Disney, knew the movie, get drafted. They bring us all out there. Michael Eisner, who's the CEO of Disney, is a big hockey fan. He's just telling us kind of how they ended up in this world, and asked us what we all thought about the name of the team, and we were all standing around together. Many of the guys are coming from Montreal Canadiens, Boston Bruins, Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'm coming from the Pittsburgh Penguins. So moving to be a Duck from a Penguin is not that big of a change as far as a pure name, if you think about it. So I said some wise remark to him, but it was, I tell you, what I learned when I was there was that, for the Disney organization, we were just a product on the ice, and the marketing that could be done with the product on the ice was real obvious. So it was a way different way of thinking about I'm a professional hockey player versus now I'm starting to feel like I'm somewhere between there and an entertainer. That part was kind of interesting to observe.
Well, you were the captain of the team. I think you had a pretty good team. You won 35, 37 games, give or take, as an expansion team, which was a pretty decent record at that point. But what was the feeling like for the guys on the team? Was there any, I don't know if animosity is the right word, but was there a level of uncomfortability because you're big, tough hockey players and now kind of you're part of just a team that's named after a Disney movie?
I think everyone embraced the opportunity that we all had because many of the players were similar to me. We were playing on third, fourth line somewhere in an organization, looking to see if there was another way that our games could change or go back to the way we were when we were a little bit younger. I think everyone had that same kind of sentiment coming in, understanding that Disney gave us that opportunity, and they treated us very, very well. They really did that. The pond at the time, the arena was incredible. They treated our families well. We had passes to the Disneyland park, and I mean it was first class. They treated us. The interesting thing is there were some nuances to it. You would score a goal, and they would on the jumbotron they would show the the replay of the goal, and after you put the puck in the net, Tinkerbell would come around from the top of the thing and put a little thing with her wand, and you'd have pixie dust on you. So it was a little different in that regard for sure.
All right. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, Troy, just a fantastic career, and you got to experience a lot of it with Mario Lemieux, and certainly his impact on Pittsburgh on the ice, off the ice, helping save the franchise as an owner. What is your takeaway from Mario Lemieux's impact, totality-wise, on the Pittsburgh Penguins?
Well, where is the team if he doesn't show up in this equation somewhere, right? I mean, it just I can't even. We're not here. 100%. I'm not part of Pittsburgh. I'm not living here. There's probably not a team in the Pittsburgh area. He was such a gifted talent that understood the game tremendously well. And people don't realize all the pain he played through. He played through a tremendous amount of pain. He did things with whether it was his with his back, well documented his back. The year he broke his hand in the playoffs, he did things that players in any sports don't do, being that injured. So the impact that he had me personally, like, what can I complain about? I have a mere, whatever going into the first year winner. I only tore my ACL. I had it reconstructed. And I'm looking at this guy, what he's going through. And I think the other players seeing that pushed us all to a different level of participation, camaraderie, engagement, and bewilderment of watching Mario go through this.
And then to see what he did as an owner and saving the franchise that way, again, there would be no Pittsburgh Penguins without all of that.
Yeah, and I know Mario well enough to know if you said to him, "Hey, gosh, I bet you had always planned on being an owner," the word "no" would have came out very quickly, right? Mm-hmm. It just wasn't. He's a very private person. Obviously, being in ownership has changed. The way his personality would be with the public, because that was just part of his deal, and his ability to be able to do that and thrive in that. It's impressive. He's a great person. Obviously a smart businessman, and I wish nothing but the best for him in the future.
Fantastic stories, Troy. Those are sensational. Cannot thank you enough for walking down memory lane with us with the Cup championships. Do you still get to see the Penguins much? Or are you involved with the franchise in many ways?
On the alumni, so we do alumni gatherings together and events. The Penguins are gracious enough to ask us to come around to, and I get down to my 6 games a year. My wife loves to go to the games, and I've got a kid and grandkids that come back into the area quite often. So I like to try to show them there and then remind them this wasn't like this when it was across the street. It was a little different, and I missed the old arena. I loved playing in the old Igloo. It was a great place to play.
All right, fantastic. That's sensational. I cannot thank you enough for sharing those stories, Troy. Just a remarkable career, and congratulations on all your success. Thank you so much.
Thank you.